Not every kingdom is built on stone. Some are stitched into paper, ink instead of blood, memory instead of walls. This is the story of a librarian, a quiet man with crooked hands, and eyes that had read too much. While kings fought their wars, and soldiers bled for borders, he built something different, a kingdom no one could conquer, one no sword could touch. He bound it not with walls, but with stories, and when the empire fell, the only thing that remained was the book he left behind. Not every kingdom is built on stone. Some are stitched into paper, ink instead of blood, memory instead of walls. This is the story of a librarian, a quiet man with crooked hands, and eyes that had read too much. While kings fought their wars, and soldiers bled for borders, he built something different, a kingdom no one could conquer, one no sword could touch. He bound it not with walls, but with stories, and when the empire fell, the only thing that remained was the book he left behind. Candle Chapter 1. The silence between shelves. The palace library stood at the edge of the world, or so it felt. Cold stone, endless aisles, rows of forgotten names, bound in dust and leather. The librarian was never seen entering. He was simply there, always. He did not speak. He did not smile. He moved like a shadow, between the scrolls, brushing his fingers along spines, like a priest counting prayers. But one shelf, near the back wall, held no titles, just one thick book, blank, heavy, untouched. Visitors would ask about it. What's inside? He would only say, it isn't finished yet. And when they left, he would unlock it, with a key made of bone, and write, not words, but places. By day the book was still, heavy, unmoving, a simple tome with rough leather and blank pages. But at night, it breathed. The librarian would light a single candle, no more, and wait. Slowly the pages would stir, not from wind, but from memory. Lines appeared, curved roads, twisting rivers, cities that did not exist in any other atlas, fortresses no general remembered building. Sometimes even entire coastlines would shift, like the book was dreaming, and the librarian would trace those changes, with trembling fingers, whispering names that had not been spoken for centuries. This is not geography, he once said. It's memory, the kingdom remembering itself, through me. And as dawn broke, the book would close on its own, locking the new map. Inside, silence once more. In a room with no windows, behind a locked iron door, the librarian kept a vial, not of ink, but something older. It shimmered when touched by moonlight, black but not empty, thick but weightless. Some said it was blood, others the tears of kings. But the librarian knew its source, memory. He used it sparingly. A single drop could write a city into being, could resurrect a name, long buried in forgotten soil. But once written, it could never be removed. Fire would not burn it, water would not wash it, even death could not silence what was written. One night, a soldier demanded the librarian erase a line. That man is a traitor, he said. The librarian shook his head. He is history now, he whispered, and the page stayed black. The word remained, because the ink had already remembered. The library was larger than the palace, larger than the city. It did not grow outward, but inward. The deeper one walked, the less sense time made. Shelves curved in impossible arcs. Stairs folded back into themselves. Corridors vanished and reappeared, where no map could reach. The librarian had no guide. He didn't need one. He had walked these aisles so long that the walls seemed to know his step. Books whispered when he passed, not in words, but in breath. And near the farthest shelf, past the ink that moved, past the scrolls that hummed, was a hallway that led absolutely nowhere. No door, no light, no dust, just a quiet that pressed on the bones, like a secret buried too deep. The librarian stood there sometimes, hands folded, eyes closed, listening, because sometimes, even nothing, remembers something. She arrived unannounced, no procession, no crown, just a tired woman, in royal colors, that no one recognized anymore. I used to rule this place, she said, but no one believed her. The records said nothing. The portraits showed other faces. The palace guards had never heard her name. So she came to the library, the last place that still kept secrets. The librarian looked at her. For a long time, he did not bow. He did not question. He simply led her to a forgotten shelf. Beneath the staircase, There, hidden between books on river law and forgotten feast, was a thin journal. Its spine cracked gently when opened. Inside, her name, a drawing of her crown, a list of laws she once wrote, in a language no one spoke anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. "So I wasn't just a dream," she whispered. "No," said the librarian. "You were a kingdom, and I kept you safe in a sentence." It sat on a pedestal, wrapped in silver cloth, untouched by daylight. For over 100 years, the binding was brittle. The pages shimmered faintly when the light changed, but no one knew what it said, until one night, when a full moon poured its light through the high window of the western dome. The librarian unwrapped it, opened to the first page, and words appeared, glowing like frost, across dark parchment. It was not written in ink. It was written in moonlight itself. Stories of vanished cities, of towers carved from glass, of rulers who spoke in colors instead of words. As the moon shifted, the letters changed. What once was a history became a warning. What once was a prayer became a prophecy. The librarian read aloud, softly, slowly, like reading a dream he had forgotten. He once lived. It was a language without sound, not written with letters, but with shapes that pulsed, curved spirals, angled shadows, lines that moved when you weren't looking. The librarian found it, etched into the bones of an old atlas, long sealed in a locked cabinet. When he tried to speak it aloud, nothing came. His voice simply stopped. But in silence, he understood. It spoke to the skin, not the ears. It told of a people who built cities underground, whose voices could turn stone to dust, and whose kings were crowned by shadows. He copied the symbols carefully, hand trembling, eyes watering, as though the very act of writing bruised his soul. This language, he thought, was not lost. It was buried to protect those who heard too much. And from that day on, he read it only with closed lips and open fear. In the lowest level of the library, beyond the rotting scrolls and the broken hourglasses, there was a hearth. It had no fuel, no wood, yet it burned, not hot, but bright. A cold fire, low, gentle. The librarian brought it pages, but not just any pages, only those written in falsehood. Lies crumbled in its glow, stories rewritten by conquerors, gone. Edicts passed under forged names. But when a true sentence touched the flame, it did not burn. It glowed, golden for a moment, like the fire bowed in respect. "The fire remembers," he said, "even when the world does not." Some tried to destroy it. Others tried to steal its flame. But only the librarian knew its secret. The fire was not from this world. It was memory, made into light. And memory, when pure, cannot be silenced. He came to the library, in the middle of the night, put it, alone. A prince without his guards, without his pride. "You keep the past," he said. The librarian nodded. "Then I need your help." The prince whispered, "I want you to erase me, not just from books, but from memory itself." The librarian studied him, saw the sorrow, the bruised knuckles, the eyes heavy with guilt. "Why?" "Because I know what I will become," said the prince. "A tyrant, a butcher, a name they will curse." "Then change," said the librarian. But the prince shook his head. "It's too late. I feel it. History already has its claws in me." So the librarian opened a small book, wrote the prince's name in glowing ink, then closed it, locked it, and placed it on a shelf that no one would ever find. Not to forget him, but to forgive what might have been. Behind a rusted gate, beneath the seventh staircase, was a door with no handle. It did not open by force, only by need. Inside was a room, round, windowless, filled wall to wall, with unwritten books. Each was blank, each sealed shut. The librarian called it the waiting room. "Stories live here," he said, "not past ones, but those that haven't happened yet." A soldier once entered, trembling, his hands stained with blood. He touched a book, and it opened. Inside was his future, a line of peace he had never dreamed. He left the war that day, never returned. Others weren't so lucky. Some opened books that screamed. Some turned pages that bled. Not all futures are kind, the librarian warned, but they are waiting to be written. And as he left, he glanced back once, and every book, just for a moment, opened its eye. It was kept in a jar, sealed with bone wax, and wrapped in pages, torn from forgotten funerals. The ink was thick, nearly solid. It smelled like ash and salt. It was made, the librarian once whispered, from names that were never mourned. It could write the dead back into history, not just as memories, but as changes. One line carefully placed, and a traitor became a hero. A vanished queen returned in ink. A child who never lived found a place in the royal record. But there was a price. The more the ink was used, the more real the lies became, until truth began to unravel. Statues were built for people who never breathed, tombs filled with bones no one could name. And so the librarian used it, only once, on the name of someone he loved and lost. He wrote them a second life, a simple one, a peaceful one, then buried the jar beneath the coldest stone in the library, afraid he might use it again. He arrived not as a conqueror, but as a reader, robed in gold, surrounded by scribes. But when he entered the library, he came alone. "I want to be remembered," he told the librarian. "You already are," the librarian said. "No," the emperor frowned. "I don't want to be recorded. I want to be written. A myth, a legend, a tale that lives long after stone crumbles." He offered bribes, threats, even his own blood. But the librarian refused. "You cannot buy story," he said. "You must earn it." So the emperor stayed. He cleaned shelves, transcribed texts, sat in silence beside those who had no crowns. And slowly, something shifted. The pages began to whisper his name, not in glory, but in humility. And one day, without fanfare, the librarian wrote a new entry. A man who ruled, then listened. That was all. But it was enough, because sometimes the quietest lines live the longest. It was not hung on a wall. It stood tall and thin, hidden behind a curtain, in the back of the map room. Its surface was tarnished, fogged with age, but it did not reflect faces, only truths, forgotten ones. The librarian found it, beneath a collapsed monastery, wrapped in silk and silence. He placed it in the library, and covered it, for not everyone is ready to be seen. Once a young scribe uncovered it. She saw herself, not as she was, but as she had been, laughing in a field that no longer existed, speaking a language no one remembered. Another visitor saw nothing, just blackness, because some truths are not ready to return. The librarian looked into it once. What he saw, he never told, but afterward, he placed a lock on the curtain and whispered a warning. Reflections are honest, but they are not always kind. It was written on a slip of old parchment, folded 7 times, sealed with wax, so dark it looked like night itself. The librarian did not write it. It came to him, hidden in the spine of a banned book. No one knew who wrote it, but all who read it agreed on one thing. It was true, too true. One sentence, no name, no threat, but the words, they cut deeper than any sword. They revealed the empire's greatest secret, not a crime, but a truth so old that forgetting it had become law. The librarian hid the sentence in a drawer beneath his desk, locked it, never read it aloud. If spoken, he whispered, this sentence could topple thrones, because once a truth is free, it spreads like fire. And so he waited, not for courage, but for the right reader. It was the last book he ever touched, not written, not found, but made, slowly, over a lifetime. He bound it with the thread of abandoned scrolls, lined its spine with slivers of wood from burned kingdoms, inked it with memory, folded sorrow between every page, and when it was finished, he wrote his name on the last line, not as author, not as king, just keeper. Then he walked into the deepest corridor, past the moving maps, past the whispering walls, past time. There he placed the book, on a pedestal of salt. The floor closed around him. No one saw him go. But every so often, when the library grows too quiet, a breeze turns that book's pages, and the scent of old ink fills the air, as if the librarian never left, as if stories could bury nothing, only keep